The old piano sat near the corner of the train station, just a few steps away from where the taxis lined up every evening. Most people walked past it like it was invisible. It had been there for years, a donation from some local charity that thought public art would make the city feel more alive. But nobody really played it. Not properly, anyway. Kids banged on the keys sometimes. Drunk teenagers made noise on weekend nights. And then there was every evening around 6 o'clock, when the sky turned orange and the commuters rushed out of the station with tired faces. A man would sit down at that piano. He was thin, not just slim, but the kind of thin that made you wonder when he last had a proper meal. His clothes were old and faded. His jacket had holes near the elbows. His shoes were held together by hope more than anything else. He carried a small cardboard sign that he would place on the ground next to the piano bench. The sign said 3 simple words: music for food. He never begged. He never asked anyone directly. He just played. Soft melodies. Simple tunes. The kind of songs that your grandmother might hum while cooking dinner. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would make you stop in your tracks. Just enough to fill the air with something gentle while people rushed past him to catch their trains or find their cars. Most people did not even look at him. In a busy city, homeless people become part of the background. Sad but true. Some commuters would dig into their pockets and toss a coin or two near his sign without breaking their stride. Others would glance at him and quickly look away, as if making eye contact would somehow obligate them to do something. A few people whispered to each other as they passed. Some laughed quietly under their breath. There was one woman who worked at the coffee shop across the street. She noticed him every single day. She noticed how he always wiped down the piano keys with his sleeve before he started playing, like he was showing respect to an old friend. She noticed how he never took breaks, playing straight through the evening rush for 2 or 3 hours without stopping. She noticed how his fingers moved slowly but carefully, like each note mattered to him even if nobody else was listening. One evening, she brought him a cup of hot coffee and a sandwich. He looked up at her with surprise in his eyes. It was the kind of surprise that told her nobody had shown him kindness in a very long time. He did not say much. Just a quiet thank you. But she saw something in his face that stayed with her long after she went back to work. Behind the dirt and the tiredness and the hunger, there was something else. Something like sadness mixed with something deeper. Something broken. She wanted to ask him his story. Everyone has a story. But she did not want to push. So she just made it a habit. Every evening, a coffee and a sandwich. Sometimes he would nod at her. Sometimes he would give her a small smile. But he never talked about himself. And she never asked. What she did not know, what nobody at that train station knew, was that this man had once been someone completely different. 5 years ago, he was living in a nice apartment in another city. He had a wife who laughed at his jokes, even when they were not funny. He had a daughter who was 7 years old and thought her father was the greatest person in the entire world. He had a job teaching music at a small private school. And he had a gift. Since he was 4 years old, he could play the piano in ways that made people stop and listen. His mother used to say that music lived inside him the way blood lived inside other people. It was not something he learned. It was something he was born with. By the time he was 12, he was performing at local concerts. By 16, he had won national competitions. By 20, he received a full scholarship to one of the most respected music schools in the country. His professors said he had the kind of talent that comes along once in a generation. But talent does not protect you from life. One winter night, while he was away at a conference in another city, he got a phone call that changed everything. There had been a fire, an electrical fault in the old building where his family lived. By the time the firefighters arrived, it was too late. His wife and daughter did not make it out. He rushed home, but there was nothing left. Just ashes and silence and a hole in his chest that nothing could fill. He tried to keep going. He tried to return to teaching. He tried to sit at his piano and play. But every note reminded him of his daughter sitting beside him, watching his fingers dance across the keys with wonder in her eyes. Every melody brought back the sound of his wife humming along from the kitchen. The music that had once been his greatest joy became his greatest pain. He stopped playing. He stopped teaching. He stopped doing much of anything. The grief swallowed him whole. He could not pay his rent. He could not hold down a job. He pushed away every friend who tried to help because being around people who still had families felt like torture. Slowly, piece by piece, he lost everything. His apartment, his savings, his sense of who he was. For 3 years, he wandered. He slept in shelters when he could find space. He slept on benches when he could not. He ate whatever he could find. He became invisible, just another face in the crowd of people that society had forgotten. And then one day, he found himself walking past a train station with an old public piano sitting near the corner. He had not touched a piano in over 3 years. The thought of playing made his hands shake, but something pulled him toward it anyway. Maybe it was hunger. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was some tiny voice inside him that still remembered who he used to be. He sat down on the bench. He placed his fingers on the keys. And for the first time in 3 years, he played. Just a simple melody. Nothing special. But it felt like speaking again after years of silence. The music came out rough and rusty. His fingers were stiff. His heart was heavy. But he played anyway. A man walking past dropped a few coins at his feet without stopping. And just like that, he realized something. He could not do much anymore. He could not hold a job. He could not face the world. But he could do this. He could sit here and play simple songs and maybe earn enough for a meal. It was not a life, but it was survival. So every evening he came back. Same bench, same piano, same cardboard sign. He never played anything complicated. The complicated pieces lived in a part of his memory that hurt too much to visit. He played simple tunes that asked nothing of him emotionally, just enough to get by. And that is how the people at the train station knew him. The quiet man with the old clothes who played gentle music for spare change. The man they walked past without a second thought. The man some of them laughed at when they had a bad day and needed someone to look down on. They saw a beggar. They saw a failure. They saw someone who had given up on life. They had no idea who he really was. They had no idea what was about to happen. Weeks passed at the train station. Then months. The seasons changed, but his routine stayed the same. Every evening at 6 o'clock, he would appear at the old piano like clockwork. The commuters got used to seeing him there. He became part of the scenery, as familiar as the ticket machines and the coffee shop across the street. Some people started to recognize him. A few regulars would drop coins without being asked, just out of habit. But most still walked past without a second glance. The woman from the coffee shop kept bringing him food. She learned small things about him over time. She learned that he preferred black coffee with no sugar. She learned that he always said thank you twice, once when she handed him the cup and once when she walked away. She learned that he never played when it rained, even if he was hungry. He would just sit on a bench nearby and watch the water fall on the piano keys like he was protecting an old friend from getting hurt. But she still did not know his story, and he still did not offer to tell it. One Friday evening in late autumn, the station was busier than usual. There was some kind of event happening in the city center, a concert or a festival, something that brought extra crowds pouring through the station. Groups of young people filled the platforms, laughing and talking loudly, full of energy and excitement. The air felt electric, the way it does when people are ready to have a good time. He sat at the piano as usual, playing a soft melody that disappeared into the noise of the crowd. Nobody was listening. That was fine. He was used to it. He kept his head down and let his fingers move across the keys, earning his dinner one quiet note at a time. And then they noticed him. A group of college students, maybe 6 or 7 of them, wandered over to the piano. They were well-dressed. Designer jackets, expensive shoes, the kind of young people who had never worried about where their next meal was coming from. They had been drinking a little, not enough to be out of control, but enough to make them louder than they needed to be. Confident, careless. One of them pointed at the cardboard sign on the ground. Music for food. He read it out loud in a mocking voice, and his friends laughed. The man at the piano did not look up. He just kept playing, hoping they would get bored and move on. But they did not move on. One of the girls in the group pulled out her phone and started recording. Another guy leaned against the piano and grinned down at him. "Hey, play something good," he said. "This sounds like elevator music." His friends laughed again, louder this time. The man still did not look up. His fingers kept moving, but they trembled slightly now. He played the same simple melody he always played, trying to block out the voices, trying to stay invisible the way he had learned to stay invisible for years. But the group was not done. "Come on," one of them said, leaning closer. "Play something real. You know, something that actually takes skill. Or can you only play baby songs?" Another round of laughter. More phones came out. More recording. They were having fun now. The kind of fun that comes from making someone else feel small. A crowd started to gather. Some people stopped to watch out of curiosity. Others lingered because they sensed something was happening, even if they did not know what. A few commuters shook their heads in disapproval of the students, but kept walking. Nobody stepped in. Nobody said anything. The jokes kept coming. One of the guys pretended to drop a coin and then pulled it back at the last second, laughing at his own cleverness. Another one made a comment about the man's clothes, wondering out loud how long it had been since he had taken a shower. The cruelty was casual, easy, like it cost them nothing because to them, it did not. The man's hands stopped moving. He sat very still on the bench, staring down at the keys. His jaw tightened. His breath came a little faster. For a moment, it looked like he might just stand up and walk away. That was what he usually did when things got hard. Walk away. Disappear. Let the world forget he existed. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the phones recording his humiliation for strangers on the internet to laugh at. Maybe it was the way they looked at him like he was less than human. Maybe it was the memory of his daughter sitting next to him on a piano bench, telling him that he was the best piano player in the whole wide world. Maybe it was all of it, crashing together inside his chest like a wave that had been building for years. He thought about who he used to be. The standing ovations. The scholarship. The professors who said he had once-in-a-generation talent. He thought about his wife, clapping from the front row of every performance, her eyes shining with pride. He thought about his little girl falling asleep to his playing every single night, her small hand resting on his arm. Thought he had buried all of that. He had locked it away in a room inside himself and thrown away the key because it hurt too much to remember. For years, he played simple songs and kept his head down and told himself that the man he used to be was dead. Gone forever, just like his family. But now, sitting on this bench while strangers laughed at him and filmed his shame, he felt something stir. It was not anger exactly. It was something older, something deeper. A spark in a place he thought had gone completely dark. One of the students stepped closer, still grinning. "Seriously, man, do you even know how to actually play? Or is this just your thing, banging on keys for pocket change?" His friends howled with laughter. The man looked up. For the first time, he made eye contact. The student's grin faltered just a little, because there was something in those eyes that he did not expect. Not defeat. Not shame. Something else. The man turned back to the piano. He lifted his hands from the keys and held them in the air for a moment, completely still. The crowd had grown larger now. 30 or 40 people had gathered, some curious, some uncomfortable, some still laughing along with the students. Then he placed his hands back on the keys, but this time, he did not play a simple melody. This time, his fingers began to move in a way that nobody at that train station had ever seen before. The first notes rang out sharp and clear, cutting through the noise of the crowd like a knife through paper. It was a piece that most people in the audience would not recognize by name but would feel in their bones. One of the most difficult compositions ever written for piano. A piece that took most professional pianists years to master. A piece he had not played since the night before. The fire took everything from him. The laughter stopped. The phones that had been recording his humiliation were now recording something else entirely. And the man who had been invisible for so long finally let the world see who he really was. The first notes cut through the air like thunder on a quiet night. Sharp, powerful, alive. The kind of sound that grabs you by the chest and refuses to let go. People who had been walking toward the exit stopped mid-step. Conversations died in the middle of sentences. Even the trains pulling into the station seemed quieter, as if the whole world was leaning in to listen. The college students who had been laughing just seconds ago stood frozen. The grins melted off their faces one by one. The guy who had been leaning against the piano took a step back without even realizing he was doing it. The girl with the phone kept recording, but her hand was shaking now. None of them said a word. None of them could, because what was happening at that old public piano was something none of them had ever witnessed before. His fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own, fast and precise, dancing from one end of the keyboard to the other with a speed that seemed impossible. But it was not just speed. It was feeling. Every note carried weight. Every chord told a story. The melody rose and fell like waves in a storm, pulling the listeners along whether they wanted to follow or not. People started gathering from all directions. Commuters who had been rushing to catch trains forgot where they were going. Taxi drivers stepped out of their cars to see what was happening. Workers from the nearby shops came outside, drawn by the sound. Within minutes, the crowd had grown from 40 people to over 100. And still more kept coming. An old woman near the front of the crowd put her hand over her heart. She did not know the name of the piece he was playing, but she knew what it made her feel. It made her feel like crying and laughing at the same time. It made her think of every beautiful and painful thing that ever happened to her. It made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in years. She was not the only one. All around the station, people stood perfectly still, caught in the spell of the music. Some had tears running down their cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. Some held their breath without knowing it. A young mother held her toddler close, swaying gently to the sound. A businessman in an expensive suit loosened his tie and stared at the piano like he was seeing something holy. And at the center of it all, the man played on. His eyes were closed. His face, usually so blank and guarded, was twisted with emotion, pain, love, loss, hope. Everything he had, buried for years, was pouring out of him through his fingertips. He was not just playing a piece of music. He was telling his story without words. He was speaking to his wife and daughter across the years and the silence. He was saying all the things he never got to say. The piece built and built, climbing higher with each passing moment. His hands flew across the keys, striking notes that seemed to hang in the air like stars. The crowd held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. The only sound in the entire station was the piano and the heartbeat of everyone listening. Then came the quiet part. The storm calmed. The thunder faded. And in its place came something gentle. A soft, aching melody that felt like a lullaby. Like a father singing his child to sleep. Like a final goodbye. This was the part he had never been able to play before. This was the part that hurt the most. He used to play this melody for his daughter every night before bed. She would curl up next to him on the piano bench, her head resting against his arm, her eyes getting heavier with every note. And when the song ended, he would carry her to bed and kiss her forehead and whisper that he loved her more than all the stars in the sky. He had not played this melody since the night before the fire, but now, in front of 100 strangers at a train station, he played it again. And the tears came. They rolled down his face freely, dropping onto the piano keys, mixing with the music like they were part of the song. He did not try to stop them. He did not try to hide. For the first time in years, he let himself feel everything. The crowd felt it too. They did not know his story. They did not know about the fire, or his family, or the years of wandering alone. But they felt the pain in every note. They felt the love. They felt the loss. Music has a way of speaking directly to the heart, bypassing all the walls we build to protect ourselves. And this music was speaking louder than anything they had ever heard. When the final notes came, he played them slowly. Each one deliberate. Each one a farewell. The last chord hung in the air for what felt like forever, vibrating through the station, through the crowd, through time itself, and then silence. Complete and total silence. He sat still on the bench, his hands resting on the keys, his head bowed. He was breathing hard. His whole body trembled. He had just given away a piece of himself that he had been guarding for years, and he did not know if he would ever get it back. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then someone started clapping. It was the old woman near the front, the one with her hand over her heart. She clapped slowly at first, like she was not sure if it was allowed. Then someone else joined her. Then another. Then another. And suddenly, the whole crowd erupted in applause. People cheered. People whistled. People shouted things like incredible and beautiful and thank you. The college students who had mocked him stood at the edge of the crowd, looking like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. The guy who had asked if he could actually play stared at his shoes, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The girl who had been recording slowly lowered her phone, her face pale with something that might have been shame. But the man at the piano did not notice any of them. He opened his eyes and looked out at the crowd for the first time. He saw the tears on their faces. He heard the applause that would not stop. He felt something he had not felt in years. He felt seen. Not as a homeless man begging for food. Not as a failure. Not as someone to pity or mock or ignore. But as who he really was. A musician. A father, a human being who had lost everything and somehow found the courage to keep going. The applause continued for nearly 5 minutes. People did not want to stop. They did not want the moment to end. Some walked forward and placed money at his feet, not out of pity this time, but out of respect. Some tried to talk to him, to thank him, to ask his name. But he just sat there, overwhelmed. Unable to speak. The woman from the coffee shop stood at the back of the crowd, crying harder than anyone. She finally understood. She finally knew what she had been seeing in his eyes all those months. Not just sadness, not just pain, but a flame that had never gone out, waiting for the right moment to burn again. She had no idea that one of the phones in the crowd was about to change his life forever. She had no idea that by tomorrow, the whole world would be searching for the man at the train station piano. The video was uploaded that same night. One of the students who had mocked him posted it online with a caption that would be shared millions of times. It said simply, "We came to laugh at him." We left in tears. By midnight, 10,000 people had watched it. By sunrise, that number had grown to 500,000. By the end of the next day, over 20 million people around the world had seen the homeless man at the train station play the piano like his life depended on it. The comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. People wrote things like, "I have never cried so hard watching a video," and "This man has more talent in one finger than most people have in their entire body. And someone please find him and tell him the world sees him now." The video spread from platform to platform, country to country, language to language. News stations started picking it up. Morning shows played clips of the performance. Headlines asked the same question everyone was asking. Who is the mystery pianist? Nobody knew his name. Nobody knew where he came from. All anyone had was a 3-minute video of a thin man in worn-out clothes, playing one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written like it was as easy as breathing. And the internet became obsessed with finding him. People shared the video with musicians they knew, hoping someone could identify him. Piano teachers watched his technique and said it was world-class, possibly trained at one of the top conservatories. Music professors analyzed the video frame by frame, marveling at the precision of his fingers, the emotion in his playing, the way he seemed to disappear into the music completely. Everyone agreed on one thing. This was not some random street performer who had learned a few tricks. This was a master. And then, 2 days after the video went viral, someone recognized him. An old man sat in his living room thousands of miles away, watching the morning news with a cup of tea in his hands. He had been a piano professor at a prestigious music school for over 40 years. He had taught hundreds of students. He had seen talent come and go. But when the news showed the clip from the train station, his cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. He knew that playing style. He knew those hands. He knew the way the man closed his eyes and leaned into the music like he was praying. It was his student. His best student. The one he had called the most gifted pianist he had ever taught. The one who had disappeared years ago after the tragedy. The one everyone assumed was dead. The professor called the news station immediately. Within hours, he was on live television, tears streaming down his face, telling the world who the mystery pianist was. He talked about the scholarship the young man had earned. He talked about the competitions he had won. He talked about the bright future everyone had predicted for him. And then he talked about the fire, the wife and daughter who did not survive, the way his student had vanished into grief and never come back. By the end of the interview, half the country was crying along with him. The search for the man intensified. Reporters went to the train station hoping to find him. Cameras set up near the old piano, waiting for him to appear. People left flowers and notes and money on the bench where he used to sit. One note said, "Your music saved me. Please come back." Another said, "You are not alone anymore. The whole world is looking for you." But he was not there. After that night at the station, after the applause finally stopped and the crowd slowly disappeared, he had walked away into the darkness and not come back. He did not know about the video. He did not know about the millions of views or the news coverage or the professor crying on television. He only knew that he had done something terrifying. He had opened a door inside himself that he had kept locked for years. And now he did not know how to close it again. He spent the next 3 days hiding. He found a small chapel on the edge of the city that let homeless people sleep in the basement when the weather got cold. He sat in the back pew during the day, staring at the stained glass windows, trying to make sense of what he was feeling. For years, he had told himself that he did not deserve happiness. He did not deserve music. He did not deserve a life. His wife and daughter were gone because he was not there to save them. If he had been home that night instead of at some conference, maybe he could have gotten them out. Maybe he could have done something. The guilt had eaten him alive, day after day, year after year. Playing simple songs for spare change felt like the right punishment. Disappearing felt like what he deserved. But that night at the station, something had cracked open. When he played that piece, when he felt the music flowing through him again, he had felt them. His wife, his daughter, not as ghosts, but as memories. Happy memories. The sound of his daughter laughing when he played silly songs. The feeling of his wife's hand on his shoulder during his performances. For those few minutes, they were with him again. And for the first time since the fire, the memory did not feel like a knife in his chest. It felt like a gift. And that scared him more than anything. Because if he allowed himself to feel that, if he allowed himself to play again, to live again, did that mean he was letting them go? Did that mean he was moving on? Did that mean he was forgetting them? He sat in that chapel for 3 days, wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. He thought about his daughter asking him to play her favorite song before bed. He thought about his wife telling him that his music made the world a better place. He thought about the promise he had made at their funeral. The promise to never be happy again, because how could he be happy in a world without them, Dodd? But then he thought about something else. He thought about the faces in the crowd that night. The old woman with her hand over her heart. The young mother swaying with her child. The businessman who had stopped in the middle of his busy day just to listen. He thought about the tears on their faces. He thought about the way they looked at him, not with pity, but with gratitude. His music had touched them. His pain had connected with theirs. And for a few minutes, they'd all felt less alone. Maybe that was what his wife meant when she said his music made the world better. Maybe it was not about him at all. Maybe it was about what he could give to others. On the third night, he made a decision. He did not know if he was ready. He did not know if he deserved a second chance. But he knew that hiding in the dark was not honoring his family. It was just another way of letting the fire win. He left the chapel the next morning and walked back toward the city. He did not know that a famous concert hall had already offered him a stage. He did not know that donations in his name had reached over $200,000. He did not know that the whole world was waiting for him. All he knew was that it was time to stop running. It was time to play again. The concert hall was packed. Every single seat was filled. People stood in the aisles and along the back walls because there was nowhere left to sit. Outside, hundreds more gathered around screens that had been set up to broadcast the performance live. News vans lined the street. Cameras flashed. The energy in the air was electric, like the whole city was holding its breath. Inside, the stage was simple. Just a grand piano under a single spotlight. No decorations. No orchestra. No distractions. This night was about one man and his music. Nothing else. The audience waited. Minutes passed. The scheduled start time came and went. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is he coming? Did he change his mind? Some people checked their phones nervously. Others stared at the empty stage with hope and worry mixed together on their faces. The old professor sat in the front row, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed on the piano. He had not seen his former student in over 5 years. He did not know what to expect. He did not know if the man who walked out on that stage would be the same brilliant young musician he remembered, or someone changed beyond recognition by years of grief and hardship. Backstage, the man stood alone in a small room with a mirror on the wall. He wore a simple black suit that had been donated by a tailor who had seen the viral video. It was the nicest thing he had worn in years. He barely recognized himself. The face in the mirror looked older, thinner, but the eyes were different too. There was something in them that had not been there for a long time. Not hope exactly, but maybe the beginning of hope. The first small flame after a long winter dot in his hands. He held a framed photograph. His wife and daughter smiled up at him from behind the glass. The photo was old and worn at the edges. He had carried it with him through every shelter and every cold night for 5 years. It was the only thing he had left of them. He looked at their faces for a long moment. Then he whispered something so quiet that no one else could hear. "I'm going to play for you tonight. Both of you. I hope you can hear me." He tucked the photograph under his arm and walked toward the stage. When he stepped into the spotlight, the audience gasped. Then they erupted. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet before he had even played a single note. They clapped and cheered, and some of them cried openly. They had watched the video. They had heard his story. And now he was here, standing in front of them, real and alive and ready to play. He stood still for a moment, overwhelmed. He had spent years being invisible, years being ignored and mocked and forgotten. And now 2,000 people were standing and applauding just because he had walked into a room. He did not know what to do with that. He did not know how to hold it. Slowly, the applause faded. People sat back down. Silence filled the hall. He walked to the piano and placed a framed photograph gently on top of it, facing him so he could see their faces while he played. Then he sat down on the bench and adjusted the microphone that had been set up nearby. He had not planned to speak. He was not good with words. Music had always been his language. But something made him lean toward the microphone anyway. "I want to tell you something," he said. His voice was rough and soft at the same time. The sound of a man who had not spoken much in years. "I stopped playing piano 5 years ago. I stopped because the music reminded me of everyone I lost. My wife, my daughter. They were my whole world. And when they were gone, the music felt like it died with them." The audience was completely silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Just 2,000 people listening with their whole hearts. He continued. "For a long time, I thought that staying sad was the only way to stay connected to them. I thought that if I let myself be happy again, it would mean I was forgetting them. So I hid. I disappeared. I played simple songs for spare change because I did not think I deserved anything more." He paused and looked at the photograph on the piano. "But I realized something. My wife used to tell me that my music made the world a little bit better. She said that when I played, people felt less alone. And I think maybe she was right. That night at the train station, when I finally played again, I saw it in people's faces. The music touched them. It helped them feel something. And maybe that is how I am supposed to honor my family. Not by hiding, not by punishing myself, but by sharing the gift they always believed in." He took a deep breath. "So tonight, I am not playing for fame or money or applause. I am playing for them. And I am playing for anyone out there who has ever felt lost or broken or forgotten. Because I want you to know something. No matter how far you fall, your gifts can never be taken from you. They are still inside you, waiting for the moment when you are ready to use them again." He turned back to the piano. "This first piece was my daughter's favorite. She used to fall asleep to it every night. I have not played it in 5 years. But tonight, I am playing it for her." His hands touched the keys. And then the music began. It started soft and gentle, like a lullaby floating through the air. The melody was simple at first, delicate and tender. The kind of song that makes you think of safe places and warm blankets and the people who love you most. The audience sat transfixed, barely breathing, letting the music wash over them like water. Then the piece grew. It became more complex, more powerful, building layer upon layer until it filled every corner of the concert hall. His fingers danced across the keys with a skill that seemed almost superhuman. But it was not the technical brilliance that moved people. It was the emotion. Every note carried the weight of everything he had been through. The love, The loss. The years of silence. The decision to live again. He played for 2 hours without stopping. Piece after piece flowed from his fingers, each one more beautiful than the last. Some were famous compositions that the audience recognized. Others were songs he had written himself, melodies that had lived inside him for years waiting to be released. He played happy songs and sad songs and songs that were both at the same time. When the final note faded into silence, he sat still on the bench, his head bowed, his hands resting on the keys. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the audience exploded. The standing ovation lasted 12 minutes. People cheered until their throats were raw. They cried until they had no tears left. They clapped until their hands hurt. And through it all, he sat at the piano looking at the photograph of his wife and daughter, tears streaming down his face, finally at peace. That night changed everything. Donations poured in from around the world. Offers came from orchestras and concert halls and recording studios. But he did not take them. Instead, he used the money to start something new. He opened a small music school for homeless and at-risk youth. A place where kids who had been forgotten by the world could come and learn that they had gifts worth sharing. He taught them piano and guitar and violin. But more than that, he taught them that their past did not define their future. That no matter how broken they felt, there was still music inside them. Every night before he went to sleep, he looked at the photograph of his wife and daughter, and every night he whispered the same thing: "Thank you for showing me how to live again."